The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
All right, I'm going to start handing out assignment 3. And on the back of assignment 3 are the changes that we've made to the syllabus, which is mostly in the order of readings, but also we've listed some of the games that we've changed how some of the games that we're going to play later on this semester. Because basically we changed assignment 3 in the middle of the semester. Who actually read ahead to figure out what assignment 3 was? How long ago did you read ahead?
Like 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Okay, so whatever was online is different from what it is now. But if you just read like the one-line description, it's that. But it is not. But all of the text that we wrote up completely changed. So this is like see what? It's mostly rearranged. Mostly the scheduling rather than the actual readings. I don't think we introduced any new reading except for maybe April 7th, which is Gonzalo Frasca. That's been on our website for a while now, though. So yeah. So I don't know if you've seen that one, Gonzalo Frasca, Simulation 101. It's like a series of web pages. It's online only. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. So now you've done the reading. So I'm just doing this because people are still cutting things out. So I figured I might as well just talk. So assignment 3 is going to be about applying everything that you've learned so far. Remember, assignment 1 was kind of like just getting used to the discipline of iterating, of prototyping, of iterating. I feel that you've all shown like a lot of good experience and skill in doing this. One thing while I saw those presentations, it reminded me that we actually have notes about all of your individual write-ups that I should copy and paste into the grading section of the Stellar website.
I'll do that today.
Oh, great! That'd be super helpful. Yeah, I just forgot to do that step. So you'll be also getting a little bit more detailed feedback on your individual write-ups. But in terms of the game designs, things are coming along pretty well. And if you want more feedback on the individual elements of each game that you worked on in the past, we can totally give that to you. I'm just guessing a lot of you are probably more eager to just move on to the next project right now. So I'm going to talk about that. Remember, assignment 1 was about the skill of prototyping and iterating. Assignment 2 was about trying to come up with some sort of holistic aesthetic experience. And assignment 3, we're asking you to apply that to the end of trying to depict the perspective of somebody who lived or lives in the real world. That person could be a very specific person. Like, I'm going to bring up some examples here. Campaign Manager 2008 specifically states that you are the campaign managers of either the McCain or the Obama campaigns. That you are that's one person. Now, the powers of what you have in this game really is like a whole network of campaigners. But yeah, like the person who's calling the shots. You are trying to win. You are trying to win the electoral college through this. We probably don't have time to play this, but anyone wants to take a look at what's in here, all the bits, the way how each state is represented, how the United States is represented, the fact that you're basically just trying to win points among demographics by raising hot button issues. That's all this game is about, and it's putting you in the shoes of a very specific person who actually existed in real life. An alternative would be something like Tulip Mania 1637, which is a game about, anyone hear about the great tulip crash of 1637 in the Netherlands? One of the first bubble markets. Who's heard of bubble markets? You've got to have heard about it in the past 4 years, maybe 8 years. 2008 was a real long time ago. 6 years ago. Oh, jeez. Okay.
It's okay. Next one's coming up next year, so it's cool.
Oh yeah, I've read those articles too. So this is about prices of tulips, flowers being driven up by speculation to horrendous amounts, and trying to be smart and exiting at the right time, and often not being quite pulling it off at the right time and losing your shirt in the process. And this game puts you in the shoes of a speculator, someone who is trying to play this market at that time when the market is behaving in this very, very volatile, incredible increases and yet even faster crashes. This was actually designed by a professor in Syracuse University, Scott Nicholson, who runs Board Game with Scott, and it's pretty awesome. If you like playing it, you can see the little tokens, little flower heads, and you get to do things like try to convince buyers to buy at a higher price than what you had originally bought it at. Things like that. Can I talk a little bit about these three?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I chose 3 games. So what we're asking you to do is choose a real-world historical, political, cultural, economic situation. So you might be choosing some problematic situations, like the conquest of Africa by Europeans. So it's a game about African exploration during the 19th century. It's made in the 70s. They tried to be less problematic. They were not entirely successful because of the point of view of this game is entirely of the European explorer entering this forbidden Africa and finding things there, and basically finding Zulu tribes, which were not all throughout Africa, of course, and finding other explorers who had died there previously. Biblical things like King Solomon's mines, things like that. But mechanically, it is an interesting way to talk about exploration. Not so much about the bigger issues around what imperialism was, what that kind of conquest was. We have, if you're thinking about doing a live action game, we've got a couple of different versions of how to do live action games. This could be a live action role playing game, it could be a party game, a conversation game. This is a book called Heads of State: 9 Short Games About Tyrants. We've got, I haven't played many of these yet. But we've got basically, the first game here is called Coup d'etat. Basically, why are dictators what they are? How did they become a dictator? In this case, Gaddafi's idolization of Egyptian President Gamal Nasser, reading Nasser's philosophy of the revolution, thinking about plots against the Egyptian monarchy, but also entering into the military academy in Benghazi in 1963, and then having other officers in training with him organizing the group that's going to overthrow the pro-Western Libyan monarchy. Basically, you're dictators in school learning how to be future leaders in one of these games. So what this book is trying to do is try to give you multiple different viewpoints of tyranny and of those kind of problematic things. There's communism in here. There's Maoism in here. A game about the disappearances of people. So if you were thinking about making a game about Argentina in the 70s, good luck, but they've tried it, so you can see what they did. And then another version, so Dog Eat Dog is a game about imperialism, in particular the assimilation of Pacific Islands. The great thing about this game is you've got people who are acting as the new colonizers, but you've also got people who are acting as the native populace, and the different interactions that happen from there. So basically, if you decide you want to do something that's coming to, trying to do something more serious, if you're trying to do something with more of a problematic tone, you might want to consider having multiple different perspectives. We're saying a single perspective, but at least understanding what the other different perspectives are of the people who are inside of that system, which is good to take account of.
I think if every player is taking on the perspective of a single person, that's okay, even if different players in the same game are taking different perspectives. Mm-hmm. I think that might complicate things a little bit because, again, you end up in the situation where you're designing basically 2 very different kinds of games that interact, but some of you have had experiences with that and made it work. So it's certainly not out of the question. But what we don't want is the situation where you are simultaneously 2 people, right? It's like I am controlling the survivors and the zombies simultaneously. That's a little bit weird. Yep.
Can we use a historical persona who had multiple personality disorder?
That is. We should talk about that. Good luck.
The system.
Yeah.
So if it's really about the system, and that's just one interesting way of pulling it out. Maybe there are multiple players playing those individual personalities. Kind of gets close to it. Really, I think the biggest focus is the system, right?
Yeah. It should be less about the individual person, because the idea is the perspective of that person, but more about the conditions in which that person lived in.
Yes.
I've never played a train game, before, where you could be the seat of presidents of multiple corporations, and one corporation, you just embezzle all their money and then just dump it in a different corp. When you control these multiple corporations.
That sounds like 18XX. One of the 18XX.
One of the 18XX.
Yeah, and that's one where ostensibly in a lot of the 18XX games, your actual role is one of a robber baron.
Yeah.
Of a capitalist who lived in the 1800s, who owns shares in multiple companies. You're not really the president of a single company, but you may take on that role somewhere in the middle of the game. But your role is not defined by being president. Your role is being defined as being person with a lot of money in 1800, and trying to increase that wealth through railroad systems.
Could it be satirical or
Yes, absolutely. Just because you may pick a game to make a game or about a serious topic doesn't necessarily mean your game needs to be, dull or somber. And I've got some examples of that. So, how many of you play Crunch? I brought it in on day one, I think, of class. No? Two-person card game. You are a CEO of a bank. You are trying to get out of the bank with as large a golden parachute as you possibly can. To hell with the health of the bank itself. This game encourages you to, to take advantage of the government's generosity in bailing you out. It encourages you to hide cards on your body to sort of secrete funds into your own personal wealth. To be able to take money out of your own bank and put it into your own personal account so that it becomes, your fortune rather than the bank's fortune. To take really, really risky, to make really risky loans that may never pay out. And it came out in 2009, so you can understand why this game was made. This company, Terrible Games, basically makes satirical games that comment on real world situations, but this one is very, very clearly you are a banker. The satirical version of a banker. They have another game called The War on Terror, which I did not bring out because it's a little bit unclear who you are in that game. You are supposedly a world power, but are you the president? Are you the government? It's sort of like all of the government at once. Or are you some sort of media construction of what that country is? Because you can get branded as evil, for instance, and you have to wear this balaclava with the word evil on it. But then that means that doesn't actually change your role in the game, which is actually part of the point of that game. The point is that whether you are a terrorist state or not, you kind of all engage in the same sort of activities anyway. Just being branded with evil just lets you do it with a little bit more impunity. Anyway, that game's not a great example of what we're looking for because who you are in that game is not quite well defined.
Are these games usually set number of players, or do they sometimes have range 2 to 4, or is it usually 4?
This is a 2-player game. Specifically, Campaign Manager 2008, again a 2-player game. Tulip Mania has a range. It really depends on your ability as a game designer to design for different people. But for this assignment in particular, we are asking for 2 to 4 people, but a specific number. So you can design a 2-player game, a 3-player game, or a 4-player game, but don't make a range. You don't need to make your game playable by a range, and that means you can tune it very specifically for a fixed number of players. Okay. The Gentleman of the South Sandwich Islands is an absurd game of logic discovered in 1821, which is not true at all. It was really kickstarted as a project about 3 years ago. 4 years ago, maybe?
Okay.
Yeah. This is interesting because this is probably right at the edge of what I will consider acceptable for class, because this is a game about sort of fantastical courtship, where you are two gentlemen trying to win the affection of ladies who are walking around this island, but then also they're what's the word?
Homeless. No.
The handlers.
Yeah.
the-
What would you call it? Pimps?
Oh, done it.
Yeah. Does this sound like
Maid Marian had a nurse.
Chaperones, yes, but the chaperones are also following them around and you're trying to get them alone so that you can have a quiet talk with them. It's kind of the game of Jane Austen. Now, Jane Austen, of course, wrote writing about some, sort of the social situation, but every single character that she wrote about was fictional. But the world that she was writing about is at least plausible, and it's based in historical fiction. So if you want to look at something and make the game set in Dickens' Oliver Twist or something like that, you can. You could be individual people in that setting. Do pay some mind onto how grounded in reality those things were. The more grounded they are in reality, the more different sources you can pull out for inspiration. If it's just like, well, this was just the fantastical invention of one person at this game or something like that, then you only have Orson Scott Card's writing as a reference. Whereas for like Jane Austen, well, you can actually look at real historical stuff to be able to get more ideas about how that social system works. And believe me, Jane Austen's books are actually social systems, and they're incredibly complicated. But this game is really just about walking across bridges and in a very small island. It's a sort of a holiday island, and you're all just trying to get quiet talks with ladies. Yes?
You said that it's 2 to 4, even if it's like a live action game. You don't want
Yes, I don't want a game that takes more than 4 people to play, definitely.
For us to grade, it's hard to get more than 4 people.
Yep. You will be getting your grade in August if you give me a game that requires 6 people. Yeah, it's like, I can't get that many people in a room.
It's also, we want your team to be no bigger than 4 or 5, so.
Yeah. It's easier to test if your teams are, at least the same size as the game. Something to think about is agency. Not just how does the world look like to that person. Like, for instance, in Source of Denial, you are, colonial European power for the most part, right? And you're seeing the continent of Africa as this resource-rich land to grab stuff out of. That's the perspective. But then, what are the verbs? What are the things you can do in that context? In Kolejka, you are in communist Poland in the 1980s. Poland, right? Yeah. And the only thing that you can do is stand in line for rationed goods. But what you can do is you can affect your place in line by, carrying around a cute baby. Is one of them that's out here. I believe you can knock somebody's hat off, or you can change your which line you're standing on. So maybe instead of waiting for dry goods, you're waiting for furniture, that sort of thing. It's kind of neat because all the goods that they actually have in here are actually pictures of the actual ration goods that were available in Poland in the 1980s. In fact, this was a project that was funded by some Polish historical institute. But the only agency that you have in this game is which line are you standing in and where in line are you standing, because that's the perspective that they want to get across to you. And so your whole game is all about jockeying for position. And it's actually a pretty well-designed game. We played it a few times. And that has both the perspective of this is what the world looks like. The world looks like a bunch of lines for rationed goods. To me, as someone who lives in that world, it's a kind of satirical, lighthearted tone about it, but it's grounded in reality. And then the only thing I can do, what can I do about this world that's going to give me some interesting decisions to make, right? And it's going to be which line do I want to wait for? Tammany Hall, again, Historical. I can't remember which decade this is set in though.
1890s, is it?
I think that sounds right. Somewhere in the rules they mention it, and it's about Manhattan. It's about ruling New York, where it says it's a game of backstabbing, corruption, temporary alliances, and you're basically just running for mayor. And if you can't get mayor, you're running for other city offices. Turns out that actually, as soon as you become mayor, you have just a giant target painted on your back, and everybody else who is in other positions, like you can become chief of police, precinct chairman. You then abuse those powers to sort of place new immigrants in different wards and change the demographic makeup of different wards of different boroughs in New York to be able to change the way how they vote.
What's the objective of the game?
The objective of the game is victory points for the most part. But the victory points, you can get it by becoming mayor, but then you're not staying mayor for long. And it's, let's see, how many
The perspective
rounds?
here is being inside of the machine and trying to control it.
Yep.
And the agency that you have in this is really just, you are able to coerce people to come to various locations, and you're trying to get the vote out. So back in the 1890s, when they had people who were forcing people to go to voting booths to vote, or doing things like, having free food if you came out to vote, things like that.
You can forcibly evict people from boroughs and move them into other boroughs to create, not ghettos. What am I thinking?
Tenements? I don't know.
Yeah, this is all sort of like ethnicized districts, right?
Gerrymander?
Huh?
Yeah,
It's
like gerrymandering.
but instead of changing the lines, you're actually moving people. Yeah, because if you're chief of police, you can just like grab people and pull them somewhere else. You can throw them off New York. So that's the view.
I don't like how you vote.
Yeah, but that's the perspective they're trying to place. This abuse, they're saying that in this era, if you're one of these people, you are actively engaging in the abuse of power, to sort of play with the lives of immigrants. It turns out that it's just more of a game of territory. When you actually play the game, you are looking at Manhattan as a source as a bunch of resources that you're moving around. But then but it's a very specific perspective, and imagine, I think the game is played over a period of 16 years, which is 16 turns or something like that. So check it out when you get a chance. Any questions about assignment 3? Now, one little wrinkle is on April 16th, which is just 2 weeks from now, we want you to come in here and give us a pitch presentation on what you've decided to do with your project. We want, let's see, have a concise description of how you expect it to be played, at least 2 weeks into the project, at what you decided so far, and the aesthetic experience that you want to create. So you want to tell us what kind of feel you want to get out, whose perspective this is, what sort of agency that you're likely to have in the game. Very important is to tell us where you're drawing your historical references from if it's a history game, or where you're drawing information from if it's a contemporary game. What are you using to inform this thing, your experience? Now, you could theoretically all make a game about being an MIT student at MIT in 2014. I'm going to encourage you to think a little bit broader than that. Because you don't need any additional information there, and that's why it's kind of boring to get that to grade. You can draw inspiration from other games, but also books, websites, news articles. If not just Wikipedia, but Wikipedia can be a useful resource to find other stuff. But we want you to give that presentation as if you were seeking green light. As if you were going to a publisher saying, please give me money to be able to continue work on this game. We're not going to thumbs you down. We're not going to cancel your project, but we are going to give you feedback, both on how you can improve the project on what we've heard, but also on your presentation skills. That's going to be one of the few times this class where we're talking specifically about how you deliver that presentation, because you might have to do that one day. And there are other classes, especially CMS 610, where you will get a lot of practice doing pitching. So this is a little taste of that. If you want to be able to get more practice, I would encourage you to look at that class next year. Now everything else, at the end of the semester, you're going to do the same sort of 5-minute presentation you gave today. We expect change logs. We expect with a one-page write-up. The one big difference is that everything needs to be handed in at the same time. Previously, you could hand in your write-up the following week. I believe that's the case for this assignment. Yeah, we can't do that for the final assignment in MIT because of MIT course rules. You can't hand in anything later than that, or at least the class can't ask you to hand in anything later than that. So everything is due on May 14th. Finally, we have a bunch of guest lectures that will be coming in. This is starting to segue into what do you do with the information that you're getting in this class after this class is over. April 9th, exactly a week from now, will be the Game Makers Guild, people who actually, a collection of people here in Cambridge who make board games and card games for retail, but have been funded through a range of different sources, all the way from traditional publishing model to Kickstarter, and they'll talk about their experiences of what it took to be able to take these ideas into something that people could buy off the shelf. We also have another guest lecture from the Geneva University of Art and Design. These are mostly master's students and people who've recently graduated from master's programs. So if you're going to go into a design school that is thinking about gameplay, they're mostly tech designs, so they're like the digital games for the most part. But because it's an art school, they're actually pretty broad-minded in what happens in the computer and what happens outside of the computer. So that should be fairly interesting. They're going to talk a little bit about their work. Jesper Juhl will be coming in May 7th. He is a theorist. He actually currently teaches in a number of places, including New York University. He used to teach here at MIT. He's probably best known among game scholars for writing his books on The Art of Failure, A Casual Revolution, Half Real. These are the 3 books are about games and how design, not so much how designers think about games, but how to analyze games from sort of a certain abstract perspective. I believe they're all MIT Press. If you're interested in those books, please feel free to check out our library in the Game Lab. I'll be happy to let you have a look. They're really, really easy reads because he believes in padding out his books with images. So don't. Well, he has told us this very specifically. It's like, well, I could write about half as much and then just have large images, and then the book becomes bigger. He just tells us that. But he also makes games, and he'll be here to not only talk about his current work and what he's working on right now, but also playtest games on May 7th to give you some feedback, because he's taught here before. He's been part of this class before a couple of years ago. So please don't miss any of the guest lectures. They're great folks, and give you an idea of what you could do if you want to go into design school, if you want to go into academia, if you want to make your own games and publish them and make commercial product. This gives you some perspective on what you can do. Okay. Cool. All right. Whose games are actually ready at this point in time? Everyone's ready?
All right.
Awesome. Let's play each other's games. Go.